Hello, today I would like to talk about the min-maxed endgame setups for Defiance. Quick disclaimer, if you're not interested in min-maxing or any of this crap, then you don't have to do any of this. There's really no push for it in this game, unless you're just trying to push into really high-tier expos. But if you just want a refresher or you just want to know what the best stuff to work towards is and why it's the best, then this video will basically answer every question you have. So, in the min-max world, there's only three weapons that basically exist. The Mass Blaster, the Purgatory, and the Mass Cannon. So, what makes these weapons so special is very simple. They just do the most DPS, and it's not even close. The nearest comparison to the Mass Blaster is the Blast Rifle, which literally does half the DPS of this weapon. So, it's not even a comparison between the two. The Mass Blaster starts to fall off once you get into harder and harder expos, because the Mass Blaster's DPS is only so high when you're getting all crits and you're within fall off range, which is incredibly close with this weapon. So, you can't really afford to always make sure you're critting, nor can you afford to always be in fall off distance once you're in like tier 50 plus expos. So this weapon kind of falls off. Purgatory and Mass Cannon are almost completely neck and neck. You can see, even without a damage barrel, the Mass Cannon does like 20-ish% more damage than the Purgatory just across the board, but the Purgatory fires almost twice as fast. So, you know, it really is just whatever you want to use here. So, what becomes important then is once you set up your primary weapon, be it your MB, your Purg, or your MC, you really want to make sure it has either cleansing napalm. So this is where you either need to decide, do you just want a good setup that's good at everything all the time, or are you playing with a specific group of people trying to get as far as you can? Because if you're trying to get as far as you can, you actually don't want to have 4 people running cleansing napalm, just for the simple fact that 2 or 3 people make sure every single enemy in the room has this on, and then it's just kind of like, okay, well, you know, third wheel on the wagon. But you generally will want one of these 3 weapons with cleansing napalm. Then you either decide, do you want to run a backpack synergy or a secondary set? Now, most people, it's going to be backpack synergy, and I'll talk about those in a second. If you don't want to run CN, I would highly recommend running either ether acceleration, because this will lead up to 25% team damage on the boss, or I know I have one. Let me just grab it to show you, for example. No, that's not it. Parasitic, right here. PI, Parasitic Impetus. This is another super high-end top-tier synergy because 7% damage, this is not just for you, this is for the entire team. 7% damage across 4 players ends up being more damage than like even 30% for yourself. So it's very significant. This set is also super high tier for the fact that it can replace a backpack synergy. And that's the next thing that I need to talk about. You want either guard armament if you're doing basically 99% of the content in the game, or you want, let me grab it, you want assault armament if you're pushing into super high tier expos. So let me explain what will decide what's best for you here. You can also alternatively drop guard armament for Siphon, but I'll talk about that in a second. So guard armament makes you completely invincible to basically everything that isn't at least a tier like 32 plus expo boss. Everything that is easier than that, which is literally everything in the game, this makes you completely invincible against because of the 10% life and shield steal. Now, worth noting, if you're going to run, say, PI, because you're already playing with 2 or 3 friends running CN and you don't, you know, this fourth ability doesn't stack, so you want to contribute to the team damage in another way, if you're using a set that has 10% or more life and shield steal like this, you don't need to drop GA. Now, some people like to run them both, and that's fair, but consider this. The Mass Cannon does 40,000 damage times 4. That means every single hit of the Mass Cannon is doing in the ballpark of like 200,000 damage. Like, you add the 50% from CN's 4-piece effect, and yeah, it's like 300,000 damage. 10% of one of these attacks is your entire shield bar, and that's with the highest capacity shields. As you can see, Tier 6 Ironclad is 31k. 10% of 2 to 300,000 is 20 to 30,000 on the Mass Cannons. So, you know, if one attack, when you can spam out several attacks, is going to fully heal you effectively, then what's the point of going past 10%? So that's why, as long you can use like Siphon or Spinal Tap or GA, it just gives you effective immortality. Okay, now, your GA weapon does matter. If you just want generic stuff, then make it like a Purgatory or a Mass Cannon. That's going to be just your generic go-to best backpack weapon. If you're min-maxing, it needs to be a Bombardier. This is where I'm going to explain this part probably a few times because there's like 4 separate things that are about to come together in a synergistic way that are super strong that you need to understand. When you get into higher tier expos, think 50 plus, everything one-shot you. Archer balls one-shot you, skitterlings one-shot you, everything the boss does one-shot you. So this right here no longer keeps you alive because you just die in one hit. So what keeps you alive is movement speed. And the other thing that keeps you alive is this right here. This revive token. The only way you can die in Defiance is if nobody has a revive token. And part of that is because of this perk right here. I don't have it equipped right now, but right here, one for all. 75-meter range is basically an entire, like, 2 rooms in an expo, which means as long as one person has 1 res token, they can immediately restore the run and save it. Which means as long as you have res tokens, you're never really at risk of failing a run. So this is where I say something that's also probably going to be fairly controversial. Ironclads are just strictly better than Rhinos in every conceivable way. So Rhinos have like 2,000 more capacity than Ironclads, so they have like 7,000 more capacity. What makes the Ironclad better? You would think, you would intuit that higher capacity is all that matters. Well, remember what I said about leeching and how much health you're leeching? If you're leeching 30,000 health and attack, and you're attacking 2 or 3 times a second, so you're leeching like 60,000 health and shields per second, well, unless you die immediately, it doesn't matter how much, capacity you have or how much health you have, because they'll never get through how much health you're restoring. What does matter, though, is proccing this as quick as possible if you ever don't have your revive token. So this cooldown is 5 seconds, and Escape Artist, this cooldown is also 5 seconds. Now, this is why it needs to be a Bomba and it needs to be an Ironclad for, like, true min-maxing. The Bomba allows you to perfectly pop your shield without any risk of self-downing or taking extra damage. And now, I procced my nano on myself there, so that's a little bit of a bad example, but take a look at this. So the shield will glow your character blue at 6 seconds, which means there's only a single second of downtime, see, on proccing Escape Artist for more movement speed or proccing the self-revive token. And then, because it's a Bomba, you can just constantly chain this. You can do this like 7 times in a row. And then you just shoot one enemy once with your primary damage-dealing weapon, and you get all of your health back. Another thing that's important to note, and like why you want CN so badly, is because since CN applies bio, that will allow your whole team to strip enemy armor within a second or 2. So you don't really need to invest in radiation as much. You can go Siphon to replace GA or even Nanoless if you just want more raw damage. Both of those are completely viable options. But what's really important is if you're getting bio and fire from your weapon and you have 2 or 3 players with it, so everyone's applying it all the time to everything, well, you don't need to be running bio or pyro nades because in like endgame min-maxing, applying fire means 50% more damage to the enemy. Applying bio means you can take their armor plates off, which removes 10% of their damage resistance per plate. So if you've already got those covered, you can now run flashbangs. Tier 5 flashbangs are like a 10-meter stun, which is like half the whole radius of an expo room, and it stuns them for 8 seconds. So if you've got 5 players with these, that is 32 stuns that basically lock down all the spawn points in an entire room for 8 seconds. So when you combine the movement speed from self-popping your shield with a movement speed mastery, you combine this movement speed, all you need is 1 player. This is how you can complete like a fucking tier 500 expo without glitches if you really wanted to. You just have people throw flashbangs whenever the ad waves spawn so that you guys can take care of them. Then you have the person who the boss gets aggroed on just constantly self-popping their shield with this 65% move speed. They don't even worry about damaging the boss. They just keep running while it's attacking them. That way, this setup gives you unlimited kiting, unlimited infinite instant heals, the highest DPS physically possible, and the lowest amount of downtime on these buffs because this recharge delay lines up with these. This is about as hyper-optimized as a setup can get. And hopefully you find at least one of these points useful and something you can incorporate, even if you don't want to, like, straight up copy it or whatever. I just thought it would be interesting to talk about like what like pure min maxing would look like.